And boom, we're if you're expecting the jingle, it's not going to happen because that's Phil, yesterday's man's department. Now you may notice, if you're really observant, that Phil is looking extra glamorous today. And it's an amazing thing. It is a transformation. I think it was a time that was, it was going to happen anyway. May I welcome the legend that is Petrie Hosken.
Why, thank you. I'm disappointed you didn't sing a jingle. I think you could have
You're
put some
listening
effort
to
in.
men's radio station
That's
where
better.
men really talk.
That's good.
You see, I am but putty in your
Yeah,
hands.
yeah.
You say sing a jingle, that's what I do. That's how it
Interesting
works.
choice, though, to put a woman on men's radio.
Well, at least 50%. It's very interesting because at least 50% of our audience worldwide are women.
Mm.
And that's how it is. That's how it is. Well, I thank you so much because you've only done 3 hours of broadcasting so far.
It's nothing.
It's nothing but on a much smaller radio station, and now you're on a big grown. I don't want the big time to throw you. I know you're obviously a little nervous because you only do Sky and you only do talk radio and you only did LBC and you only did Radio London. So I don't want you to be nervous.
No, World Service was nothing.
And the World Service.
Yeah.
And we've got so much in common because, like you, I went to Bosnia and stayed and took cover in a tank.
No, you didn't.
No, I did.
No, you didn't. You didn't, did you?
No, I didn't.
No,
the only
I did.
tank, yeah. You got to tell this before we get on to everything else. Go on. Tell why you it's the most extraordinary thing.
I just had some adventures in Bosnia. I was there reporting, and I was there over a 2-year period. So I wasn't there for a solid 2 years, but I'd go for 6 weeks or 2 months and then come back for a few weeks and then go back again. And it was the most extraordinary time of my life. It really was. And the men and the women of the armed forces are, they're an example to us all as human beings. They are extraordinary. I'm a big fan.
Absolutely.
And when you talk about mental health issues and post-traumatic stress and things like that, they are the people that really, really suffer with it. And live with it if they can. So, and it's not something that is really that much thought about and done. I think there's not enough done for people in the armed services.
There isn't, because I think this is something that is very close to my heart, and we'll go through some of the messages in a minute. Everyone's saying hello to you, of course. Claire Coghill, morning Russ, afternoon, says Sandra Butler, who's incredibly brave in her own special way, a lady of certain years, not in good health. Ramsey Y. Masalim, hi Ramsey. In fact, good afternoon, or Dobar Dan, as they say in Bosnia. Dobar Dan.
Dobar Dan.
Now, Paul Andrews has come up with a very good point, Petrie.
Mm-hmm.
If Phil's dad walks past today, we know something fishy is going on.
It walks past me?
Yeah, because Phil's dad is always in and out of shot. We don't know what he does. And we have a new game. It's guess the content of the cupboard. Yeah, it's extraordinary. Anyway, here we go. Hi, Russ and Petrie from Chrissy Holt, listening to us in the middle of Spain, where she lives.
Very nice.
On a tractor. Now, you were talking about the armed services, post-traumatic stress disorder or syndrome, whichever you want to call it. I was very heavily involved, I think, as Petrie knows, with what was initially called the Army Benevolent Fund, and then got changed to the Soldiers Charity. Do you know why? Do you know why that was? Why the name changed?
No.
They did a survey, and the armed forces didn't know what the word benevolent meant. I promise you.
Okay.
I promise you. So to make it simple, they just called it the Soldiers Charity.
Well, do you know what? Amazing. It does what it says what it does on the tin, doesn't it? If you do
precisely. That's the whole point.
No, I got involved. I'm an associate of an organisation called PTSD 999. And the reason and there are other PTSD charities, and I know that, and there are specifically those for the armed forces. But this particular charity deals with anyone who's got post-traumatic stress. I think it should probably be called disease rather than disorder, because disorder makes you feel like there's something wrong with you, whereas a
Oh,
disease is
that's
something.
interesting.
A disease is something you can't help but get. So this organisation deals with people. Say, for example, they've been a juror on a particularly nasty murder case or rape
Right.
case or something
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
And you can get post-traumatic stress disorder from pretty much anything. And I think that at the moment with COVID, that is what we're going to be looking at in terms of mental health issues going forward. And I remember being told that I had post-traumatic stress after Bosnia, and I felt that I couldn't own that title. I felt that I didn't deserve. I know it sounds like a weird thing to say, but I didn't deserve to call it post-traumatic stress disorder because I wasn't a soldier. I was there
Because
by choice.
you were there as part of the media, and
Yeah,
you weren't actually fighting.
exactly. So
However,
I felt I
however,
didn't deserve it in a weird way.
yeah, but that says more about you than the condition, because what you underwent and what you saw, and let's not spoil everybody's day by revealing what you did see, but let's just say it wasn't nice. It would shock anybody, absolutely anybody. I would be in bits.
Yeah, and that is true. But I think that my lack of willingness to adopt the mantle, if you like, to take on the idea of post-traumatic stress is because I really felt oh gosh, undeserving is the wrong word, but
Unworthy, not worthy, maybe,
yeah, it feels
in a
like it's
weird
something
way.
that should have been that only soldiers or people fighting or people going through that should have gone through, and that's why I sort of became attached to PTSD 999, because they found a lot of people feel like that, and they don't feel that they can call it post-traumatic stress because they don't believe that what they went through most people would think was traumatic. Well, as we know with mental illness, it doesn't matter what somebody else would call traumatic. It matters what we call traumatic.
Precisely.
And so this post-traumatic, the PTSD 999 deals with, like I said, firemen and women, police officers, jurors, anybody. I mean, you don't even have to be doing one of those jobs. You know, you just have to feel that you're suffering with post-traumatic stress, and it's a very strange mental condition.
Here's the thing, and you've touched on it as you always do with your perspicacity. But one of the things we've been saying here on Men's Radio Station, I know lots of people done it on our sister station, Women's Radio, is that this lockdown, this COVID, the year of 2020, the stress on our mental health resources is going to push it to the limit. I would have thought.
Collectively, I would suggest we've been through a trauma. Now, whether you've known somebody who's died of COVID or has become ill of COVID, we have been traumatized by fear. We've been traumatized by potentially a lack of direction from a government that we thought would be better. So there has been a collective trauma, and I don't think that anybody's really looked at it in that way. They all said, "Oh, mental health. There will be mental health issues,"
But they
but
will. They will. This is a legacy that's going to be
post
awful.
trauma
Yeah.
is a real thing. It's that
Yeah.
fear when you go out into the street, perhaps, and you're terrified that somebody might have COVID. You're scared to go and walk the dog in the park, or you see somebody with a face mask and it makes you feel a certain way. That's post trauma. That's post trauma stress. And I think that if more people understood post trauma, we could then all kind of own that title and therefore get the right care that we need, because post-traumatic stress is a very different mental health issue, for example, from depression in terms of treatment, but it may look the same. So I think we have to analyze what it is that we're going through, and for a lot of people it will be trauma.
Now, it's interesting because Phil, from day one, and Phil and I initially totally disagreed on everything to do with well, I disagree with him. I just agree just because he's Phil. I mean, you just have to disagree with him. But at the beginning, and I have to say, I've done a sort of 180 on that. I've done a 180 on this because, without doubt, the legacy, which is the word I used a few moments ago, and the long-lasting effects of this, the economy's gone, and the 2000 and you would know this better than most people because you got your finger on the pulse of just about everything. But the 2008 crash started by the greedy second mortgage, those awful mortgage nonsenses in America, and everyone thought, hey, that's a good way to make money, and destroyed the economy. It's only just beginning to recover now. That's 2008. We're in 2020.
It's a
This
very
is going to
different.
take 1 or 2 decades to bubble back again. This is what I think.
I mean, I used to be a finance journalist as well, and the way well, do you know what? I'm such a tart. I decided to do that because I was a mum to a son, my young son at the time, and that financial and stock market reporters and presenters didn't have to work at weekends. That's why I did it. It wasn't a particular love of mine.
Always logic there. Always logic.
Logic. But what we saw with the crash that you just mentioned was an entirely different economic set of circumstances. It was based on, like you said, these toxic mortgages that were being bundled and sold onto banks, who then realized that they were never going to get their money back. And it was fueled by greed, and it was fueled by a Russian roulette attitude to money. Since then, that has changed. Now, it has been forced upon the banks to make sure they've got enough money saved so that if this ever happened again, that they would be responsible for it. We've actually profited as a country financially with bailing out some of the banks. Now, I'm not saying that it's a good thing, but we have profited from that. This crash is entirely different. It is not based on a weak economic forecast. It's not based on something going wrong with money. This is, and a lot of economists have been saying this is an economy that has had the brakes slammed on it by an outside influence, i.e. COVID. So there's nothing wrong. There was nothing wrong with the economy before this happened. In terms, if you believe in capitalism or not, there's still too much poverty. There's still not enough money filtering down the chain. So there's a lot wrong with the economy in that term. But in general terms, this is why they're talking about a V-shaped recovery. It's now going to be more like a U, but it won't be the sort of, long, slow recovery that we saw before, because it's an entirely different set of circumstances. That is the general thinking by some economists.
It's interesting. I was actually with a statistician yesterday.
Oh Lord!
A professional
lies, damn lies, and statistics.
No.
You can do anything with statistics.
He's a really smart guy, and he was showing me the graphs and everything from the National Office of Statistics, I believe it's called.
Yeah,
which is a sort of government quango and doesn't agree with the government at all. And the figures are very, very, very interesting. And what it was showing on all these graphs that I was going through on the laptop is that the number of people testing is going up. But the reason for that is they're testing a lot more people. Does that make sense? So in other words, instead of testing 100, they're testing thousands. Well, of course, the numbers are going up because they're testing more people.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the death rate, and I'm sorry to be blunt, is absolutely, and no pun intended, flatlined. The death rate. Now, in March, when this started, and I was looking at all these things, and they've kept this data for many, many years. This isn't something they've just dreamed up this week. They've kept it for years on death rates and things like that. The death rate in March spiked. Since then, absolutely flat.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. This morning I was interviewing Mr. Sotra from the London Assembly, who's in charge of health for the London Assembly.
Wow.
And I asked him a very simple question. And I said, of the tests that you know are coming back positive,
Hmm.
what percentage of those are ending up in hospital? Now, that's a really simple question I would have thought to ask somebody in charge of health in London.
You
He
think?
didn't know. He didn't know. He didn't know what the correlation was between the numbers going up. Like, all they can say is the numbers are going up in hospital. I wasn't interested in that. I want to know what the percentage of people testing positive are ending up in hospital, because that will tell us something about COVID and where we are now. But that figure, he said, oh, I don't think we have it. I was like, well, surely you should have it. So there's a lot. And what I was saying about lies, damn lies, and statistics, when it comes to statistics, they can say, and percentages, well, you know, there's 100% more cases of COVID in Shepherd's Bush, right? Which is where I hail from, or I live at the moment. So 100% more cases in Shepherd's Bush, which would make you go, oh my God. But that could be from one person to two people. That's 100% increase.
The point. That's
so
the point.
We're hearing all these percentages, and I'm urging everybody who's nervous and worried about COVID, please don't listen to the percentages. Look at the numbers. They will tell you far more about where we are. And that's why I wanted to know the number of people who are testing positive who are ending up in hospital.
Here's the thing.
And why they're ending up in hospital as well, because a lot of people testing positive are ending up in hospital because they've broken their foot. So
you see, I took the example. I know I mentioned it last week that one of the founding members of, you know, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, fabulous songs, great pop tunes, blah, blah, blah. The guy died. He was 92 years old. Please God by all of us, right? 92. And it said he died of COVID.
Yeah.
And my point was, do you expect him to live until he's 257? Do you assume he was running 10K a day and going down to the gym for 5 hours? He was 92.
Yeah.
You know, it's a reasonable, it's a good innings.
There is an atmosphere of fear at the moment. And I am curious as to why we are not party to all of the figures. Because the other thing that is really quite terrifying is that in the last few months, there have been 200 pieces of legislation passed in the Commons without scrutiny. 200 new laws, which we don't know what they do. Now, a lot of people say, don't be stupid, Petrie, because, you know, the government's got to do what the government's got to do in order to save all of our lives. Be careful how much privacy and freedom we give away. There was an American president who once said, those who give away their freedom for security deserve neither. Because it is really worrying at the moment. And there are MPs in the House now on Boris Johnson's side, we think there's about 50 rebels now who are saying, we don't know what these laws are. We don't know how long they last. We don't know what they're for. 200. We need to scrutinise them before you put them in place. So there are other things. We need more truth. We need more scrutiny.
Now you're not. And by the way, she's nearly ready. She's nearly ready. Things were going so well.
They were intelligent, smooth.
They were intelligent. By the way, I just want to give you a little glimpse into our listeners all over the world. Just somebody joined us. Ryan, hello there from Indonesia.
Hello, Ryan.
How lovely is that? Paul Andrews, what do you think of Martin Armstrong's predictions regarding the economic future? I'm really honest. I have no idea who Martin Armstrong is. You probably know.
No,
I don't
know. Not
Sorry, Paul.
It could be any number of economists.
Now, Paul Claridge, who you've met, Paul Claridge, who hands out free newspapers in Croydon and gets abused every single. I don't understand people. I mean, this just hurts me. It says, just reading this. At work, I've had people come up and deliberately cough in my face. What's the matter with these? They're just mad. Before COVID, I would simply have brushed it off as disgusting and rude. Now I have to think, does that person have COVID? Paul is recovering from cancer. Could it get any worse? Now, I can only apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I've put this off for nearly 2 years. But I thought with Petrie here to hold my hand, here she is. Oh, God. It's arrived. It's arrived. Oh, dear me.
Oh, little Bosley, look. My little doggy.
I know.
Oh, no,
Hello, Joe. Hello, Martin.
I got the right. There we are. There we are. Timmy Alexis Carrington Ward, live from somewhere, South Fork, joins us. No, stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
Hello, girls.
Hello.
Oh, Petrie, you're like me. You don't care what you look like when you get up in the morning. You just go with it.
Oh, sorry, I thought that was Bosley talking there.
Yay! Da, 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 da. Right.
Flushed off your feet, Petrie, aren't you? Done BBC Radio London. Now you're doing men's radio.
Yeah.
Well, she's obviously a bit tense stepping up to the big time, but I'm hoping she's going to be able to cope. Right. Timmy, here's
Where's
the thing.
the favourite boy? Where's Phil?
I had to let him go. That's showbiz. Really, the answer is Phil who?
That is showbiz.
Phil will be back on. Phil will be back on
with the old, by the looks of things.
Phil is atoning for his sins at the moment because
and it's going to take a while.
It is going to take some time. I discussed this with Petrie Hosken earlier, and I think the mere fact that I know you, Timmy, is me. That is my atonement. I don't even know. I don't know. I don't need to go and pray to God. That is my atonement. Right, let's be serious for a sec. Sarah Padette Moore, as a doctor, I can say that numbers don't add up at all. I think the virus took out most of the people who it was going to first time round. Remember, this is a doctor. We also have a culture in the UK of keeping people alive. The number of x-rays I report where the clinical details are 97-year-old with advanced dementia infection, then the team indulge in heroics to keep them going.
Yeah.
Where do you and now you're not on the BBC, you can speak your mind. Where do you stand on that? Somebody's 97, they've got dementia.
Very sensible doctor. I know Sarah. She's right. I think we do have to have a proper conversation about death in this country because, there was a friend of mine's mother who had fully advanced dementia, and she fell out of bed, broke her hip, but they gave her a new hip, even though she didn't know what the heck was going on, and she died 3 months later. I don't know. I don't want anybody to be in pain or suffering that way, but I think we do have to have a grown-up conversation about death and keeping people alive no matter what.
I don't want to play top
example, isn't it? Though this is a good example of dying a death, isn't it? This sort of.
Well, I've been wondering why we've bothered to keep you alive for so long.
Well, why?
How is your hip, Petrie, since you last fell over? Have you had you need your hips replacing. She's had 2 falls. Do you know she's fallen again yesterday?
No, you're joking.
Black and blue.
Black and blue, I am. No, that's because of Timmy. I have to declare something which I never thought I'd ever publicly say.
Oh, here we go.
For any of this to make any sense, particularly if we start talking about Timmy's battle with depression, which I believe we're going to talk about, is that he happens to be my best mate.
Yeah.
So
much about you, Petrie, and your golden heart.
I'm very tragic.
News to me and all.
Yeah,
you're such a liar. So I fell over one evening, having imbibed a little too much with Timmy, and did my ankle. Yeah, and did my ankle, and since then I've fallen over several times on my ankle. So it's all his fault.
I make her go weak at the ankles, don't I?
Yeah.
You do.
Richard Todd has written in, morning, Russ and Petrie. Today, I give you the ultimate display of stupidity. Last weekend, my 46-year-old brother-in-law decided he'd attend the anti-restriction protests in central London. Move on, Rossi. My wife told him that as a result, he needed to stay away from their father, who is in his 70s. And isn't in the best of health for 2 weeks. His reaction to being excluded from the family for 14 days was to attend this Saturday's London protest too, and this time take his 10-year-old son with him. What the actual hell? Can I read the rest of this? There we go. Honestly, look at this. Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Extraordinary. I don't understand this. I don't understand people like this. I don't understand it at all. I'm absolutely at a loss.
I think there is blame for everybody in this. I think at the beginning, when it all started, we all pulled together. But I think it's all really fraying at the edges now. And I believe everyone is to blame. Actually, we had this discussion, didn't we, Petrie, that everyone has got to take a bit of the blame. The government, these rules are crazy. For instance, my niece and her boyfriend were near somebody who had COVID. They got the track and trace thing. They had to isolate themselves. They live with my sister. If you read the rules of what you are supposed to do, and we stick by the rules. Us three, we're sticklers.
We are, and you are, despite all your mucking about, you are absolutely rigid about following the rules.
Yeah,
you don't
done with, and I want to hold my head up high at the end of this and say I did my best to get through this, because so many people are suffering, work, mental, everything. It's across the board. Everyone's going to suffer. And I heard you saying before, we're going to have such like traumas after this.
Yes.
But going back to that, these are the rules that people are given as well. So my niece had to isolate with her boyfriend in their bedroom for, well, I mean, they could go around the house, but for 2 weeks. But if you read the instructions, my sister, her mum, could go about her business if she didn't have any symptoms. So everybody else in that house can go about as normal.
That's bonkers, isn't it? It's completely.
I mean, this is the issue. Isn't it? It doesn't make sense.
It's true, isn't it, Petrie? You read up about it. It's true.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true, and it doesn't make any sense.
So where
and
is that for making sense to the public? That are let's say the majority of the public, in my opinion, are fools and not following the rules. And maybe not. Maybe that's a bit harsh.
I think it's the other way around, actually.
Yeah.
I think the majority are following, but there is a whacking great percentage who just have to take the opposing view. Now, I don't know if you heard. I did. And by the way, Paul Morris, look, you joke. You got to be kidding me, right? I'd get
She
Ebony.
hates me, that cat. I don't know why she doesn't see me.
I'd get Ebony over, but she's in one of her moods and
That
she
cat
won't get out of bed.
hates me.
Oh my God, that cat really hates you. It really does.
Why have you got the cat if it hates you so much?
Because she's a cat.
A very one cat, and her friend brought round another. Thank you very much.
Well, that's just marvelous. Paul Morris. Sorry, Paul. Oh dear. Hello. That's bad. Oh, can you hear me? There we are.
Yep.
Good.
Mother.
Right. Can you hear me, Mother? Can you hear me at the back? Don't know what happened there. Paul Morris, OBE. So that's marvelous. Thank you very much for joining us. We're more interesting than going to shul. Well, it's like atonement. Paul, if you're watching this, it's atonement. You'll be absolutely fine. Now,
I was going.
Oh yes, I was doing some filming. I don't know why this is packed up on me. Hang on.
Oh, he's going to have to mention his filming.
Yeah, I've got to mention this. And one of the extras there, and I thought, well, I'm not going to get involved here. And said, I'm not going to have the. I don't believe in any of this. There's no such thing as COVID. And I thought, I've got to spend about 8 hours in the same room. I'm not going to get into a debate. Just Russell, don't get involved. And I'm not having the vaccination. And I said, oh, really? I'm just trying to put my innocent face on. He said, yeah, I'm not having the vaccination. And I said, oh, why? Because don't you know why? I went, no.
Bill Gates, was it?
Because Bill Gates is putting nanobots in those vaccines. The nanobots are linked to the 5G masts, and they can follow you wherever you go. I thought there's no point in having a conversation with this. This is mad. This is just madness.
Yeah.
I just didn't understand how people get so convinced about this nonsense.
I know.
I can't even come back on that. That's ridiculous.
I just said, oh, well, there you go, and I walked away.
Bill Gates be the least bit interested. He's got more money than God.
He'll never put it in you, Petro.
He doesn't want to know.
What you get up to.
Right. Now, while we've got Timmy, I'm hesitating. I feel like I'm walking into a minefield, but, Petrie, you've got my back. What's that?
When you say Timmy, you mean the YouTube sensation of Here She Is, Timmy?
No, I meant you.
Oh, mate.
Yeah, just you. Right, you are in showbiz. How do you see this panning out?
So
this is your opportunity to say, because you're right there, and your other half is one of London's leading musical directors for all the big West End shows.
He's backstage, isn't he?
He's company manager. Please do your research, Russell.
I thought he led the band.
No, he's backstage.
He's just backstage. Oh, he moves scenery. That's what he does.
Yeah. You know what Paul did, Russ, don't you? Thought it was following a wedding, ended up following a muck cart. That's what Paul did. Anyway, he is a company manager. So going back to what we were saying about crazy old rules and things, is we've got people going on planes, sitting by each other, and we can't have anybody in theatres. I don't understand. That's how contradictory it is. I think
They
really,
say it's because of ventilation.
but
the ventilation.
Andrew Lloyd Webber did the ventilation. There's certain theatres that have got this now. Because that's what Andrew Lloyd Webber did a concert with Beverly Knight. He didn't sing so well, but she was brilliant.
Yeah,
She is brilliant. I love Beverly.
And so they did the theatre all like that, where you were sprayed as you went in and things. I think by cats, actually, like your cat.
Do you know someone called David Massey?
That's her.
Yeah.
Just come on. Just
That's
come on.
He works backstage.
Works backstage, moving scenery.
So anyway,
yes.
he's going to be opening in Back to the Future. I wish we could go Back to the Future.
I know.
But and that's not until April.
Are they confident it's going to open?
Well, this is what
by
I'm saying.
April?
Also,
I don't see it myself, but there we go.
Yeah, this next 6 months thing. What do you do? Because that's put back, and shows are now being put back a little bit more. It's again going back to not just blaming the silly people, but the government are putting out such crazy things, aren't they? Go on a plane, do all this, do all that, and yet there's things you can't do which so contradict. Have you seen well today about the closing at 10 o'clock of pubs? They're saying it's a mistake because everyone's just leaving together.
I was saying this morning, I said, this is how the meeting went, right? Okay, everybody have a biscuit, a cup of tea. We're going to close all the pubs, restaurants and bars at 10 o'clock. Right. Can anybody see any problems with that? No? Yeah. Excellent. End of meeting. I mean, who didn't think of that?
We were just thinking of the biscuits, weren't we, Petrie?
Well, you were. Now, Petrie, let me ask you directly. Would you get on a plane? If you were offered some contract to go and do, I don't know, Sky News suddenly said, right, we need you in New York. Would you go?
Yeah.
You'd get on a plane?
Because New York is a basket case.
Well, of course it is. All right, pick somewhere else. I don't know.
Listen, I don't like to fly anyway because I flew so much in my earlier career, so I'm bored of airports and things like that. But I don't live, and I live sensibly, but I don't and won't live in fear. It's as simple as that. So yes, if there was an opportunity and I felt like flying somewhere, I would. Okay. It wouldn't bother me at all.
Timmy, would you?
Yes, I would as well.
Yeah, but and I'd go to a theatre. I have no problem with that.
You and your lady friend, didn't I, to go on the train because it made me feel better. The fear of
not
going
me. Russ.
Russ. Lady friend.
I don't have a lady friend.
No,
Russ, I should.
No, you want to think about your look, darling. You might.
I know. I really should.
But I told you and your lady friend, Marty. I call him Marty Kane. To go on the train because the fear is worse than actually being. While I was on there, I came off and I just felt better because the fear was worse than the journey, as it were.
Absolutely, and that's what I was saying before, Timmy, about post-trauma and recognising a traumatic injury, if you like, as opposed to a depression. You're somebody who has lived with depression and very serious depression. I mean, you always think of Timmy as being this clown and this, frankly, idiot.
Idiot.
One of the things I normally think of myself as.
He does live with very serious, with what can be very serious depression, which is a very different beast to a trauma injury. And that's sort of what I was trying to explain to me, because depression is one thing and the trauma we're all going to be living with after this is a different thing. Would you agree?
Well, absolutely. Let me read a couple of comments that's coming in. One from Paul Claridge. Timmy's YouTube channel is brilliant. Paul is, of course, on very heavy medication. Timmy's YouTube channel is brilliant. When I need cheering up, I tune in and I'm guaranteed to laugh my socks off. God, you got to raise the bar a bit there, mate.
It's amazing
Paul.
how little some people need.
It's extraordinary, but he doesn't get out much, does Paul? Yeah. Now, this is good. Caroline Watson Deverill.
Oh, yeah.
That's straight out. That's straight out of what
West
is that?
End.
That's marvelous. What a fabulous name. I've been on a plane It was really well spaced. The airports were very well organized, and it felt safer than being in town, to be honest. And then Chrissy Holt, the other side, she lives in Spain, and she lives in the literally on a farm with a tractor and a long-suffering husband, Mike. I want to go to the UK, but not at the moment. Possibly next year. That's why I'm getting down and others fed up. My daughter needs me, but I can't be there, and I think that's.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That can be traumatic for a parent as well. It is a trauma.
Well, also look at this. If for older people, this is what I say as well. What if? I mean, people are saying, "What about the young and things? They need to do this." But what if you're an older person and this is your last year of your life, and you've just spent it inside for fear of dying?
Yeah. No, there's a lot of. I was reading an article this morning that was saying I'd rather take my risk with COVID than not see my grandchildren at Christmas. So there's a lot of that. But I want to come back to you, Timmy, about depression versus trauma. Have you just to explain a bit of the way that you live so people can see what depression is for you?
My story is and this is only in retrospect that I've seen all this. I started off at school, always thinking I was ill and going to die. It started off with when you're younger and you realise about where we're going to die, what happens when we die. It was that sort of thing. And I used to speak
12, isn't it? 12
I think
for me it was.
I think it was probably younger. I don't know. That was when I was speaking to my dad about where we go when we die, and they were so brilliant and everything. We tried going to church and everything, and it just nothing clicked because it was just like, yeah, but do you know what I mean? When you question it. So that was a big deal. And then throughout my school life, I would be going to the doctors once, twice a week with something. It would be like that. Then I was fine from 16 onwards. Then 19 was when it hit me. It was just like, I just felt, ugh. And I think there's two types of depression. There's depression and there's anxiety depression, which I've suffered both. The depression thing is just, I can't do it. I can't do it. I just want to lie here. And I had that. I went to the doctors. I had all the tests, every single test going because I was convinced I was dying. It's that physical. And that lasted a whole year. I was not happy. The doctor tried to put me on antidepressants. I wasn't having it. No, this isn't depression. I feel terrible. Can't do anything. I'm just no energy, all of that. Then after that whole year of feeling like this, it cleared and I was fine again. Then I think it must have been about 6 months later, it came straight back. So I went straight to the doctor. I said, listen, I've had all the tests. I know I'm not dying this time. This is exactly the same. This obviously must be depression. Went on antidepressants. And then this episode, because it was first going on to antidepressants, I'd say 2 to 3 months, I was better. Compare that to a year, brilliant. But that was back in the day. So their drugs weren't as good as they are now. Then throughout my life, like most people, I think we've all got something in us that we don't want to be on pills all the time. So I've tried to come off, had to go back on, tried to come off, had to go back on. Then the last period, which was 7 years ago, I came off the pills. And it really hit. And my depression is, anyway, the short of that story, I'll come back to what my depression is. But I then went to see somebody and we decided I have to stay on my antidepressant for life. And actually, if you weigh that up with how you feel on depression, you're just like, you know what, I'll just take it.
But that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because there is a sense of, like you said, almost a sense of shame having to rely on pills, or you shouldn't. I mean, I've known you for a while, and I've seen you, and I've perhaps said to you, look, do you think you might be tipping back into something? Or you said to me, I'm not feeling quite right, and I said, just up your. You go to your doctor and up your prescription and it saves you. It gives you a life.
I'm so familiar with it now that he lets me self.
You can feel it. Yeah.
I can put my pills up myself, and I know I've covered that space. The feeling is.
Why do you think so many people though are embarrassed or think that they shouldn't take pills? For example, if you had a broken leg, you wouldn't say no to morphine. I'm just saying. You know why is it? Yeah,
Well, it's going back to the old days, isn't it? Can you remember when we had, and I'm going to use the word that we used back in then, mental hospitals, didn't we? I mean, absolutely, you're going into the funny farm sort of thing. There aren't those hospitals anymore. It was all looked down upon. It's like, oh, she's suffering with her nerves, all that. It was looked down.
Yeah, true.
We had so many of those hospitals. We don't have those anymore because of these miracle pills that have absolutely turned people's life around. Like you say, it would be like being a diabetic or something like that.
I'm refusing the drugs. Yeah.
And
so would you say to somebody who's struggling, go and see your doctor and try the medication? Because a lot of people go, oh no, I want to have a talking therapy, or I want to try something else.
I mean, try what I think, as well as I think just throw everything at it. I would. I heard you. I don't know if your radio station the other day, Russ, when you were talking to somebody with depression, and they were talking about what they tried to kill themselves, didn't they? Commit suicide. Was that right? It was the other day, wasn't it? You had somebody, and you asked the question, and the question of why you would want to, because I've had a few times of thinking I want to. I've always told my mum, never worry about me because I don't want to die. Luckily, that's my thing.
Yeah.
Depression. So I will never kill myself. Ridiculous, wouldn't it be, to be worried about it and then kill yourself? But I thought about taking my life, and the answer to that is for it to stop in your head. You just want it to stop, because
Russ, you're on mute, love. You've muted yourself.
Why did you tell him?
Oh, I know.
Why did you tell him we were having a lovely chat? This is what we're about, a little chat.
This is what I was saying to me about the difference between the type of depression you're talking about and a depression caused by trauma.
Yeah.
And so do you see this as being different?
Mind chemical balance, mind chemical imbalance. But
is it the fact that you don't have enough serotonin, which is usually the case? You know, the thing is that people say, oh, I don't want to take pills, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, some issues, which are deep issues that have scarred you, and I use the word advisedly, that have scarred you in life, would be advised, and it would probably be helpful to see a therapist or a psychoanalyst or a psychiatrist, because there might be family issues from when you were a child, or things which really have marked you out for the rest of your life. That's one thing. And that's something that is, I'm going to say, almost tangible. You know, you had terrible parents or something horrible, whatever it might be. And to talk that through makes perfect sense. If you're not, that's one side of it. If you're not producing enough serotonin so that you feel blue all the time, and that ranges from feeling blue to having low-level anxiety, which I know loads of people suffer for, and they go, I don't know what I'm anxious about. What have I got to do today? Nothing, but I'm anxious. Or to feeling, as you've said, Timmy, I can't get out of bed today. I actually physically can't get out of bed today. Then the taking of pills under the right prescription and the right advice will address that. You know, you take vitamins, and I'm not dismissing it in any way, but you take vitamins if you've got a vitamin deficiency. And it's very simple. If you're not producing enough serotonin, then you take something like, I don't know, citalopram or other brands, and then that can redress that balance. And you will start to feel better.
There is an innate sense of embarrassment, though. With people.
When people are getting over it, Petrie. I
hope so.
When I told you, there was a gymnast, and they were saying, I'm better now and I'm off the pills. They were sort of saying it in that way. And I think give the right. I was
that's the wrong message. Yeah, it's the wrong message. Absolutely. I mean, I'm on an antidepressant, but not for depression. For some people who suffer with neurological pain, and I do, they take certain types of antidepressants.
By that, you mean that's me? Am I your neurological pain?
You are my neurological pain.
Neurological pain in the arse is what you are. That is the official medical term.
That's what I said on the toilet doors anyway.
And it was interesting because I went to my chemist a little while ago to get a repeat prescription of this particular drug.
Oh, he's back.
And the pharmacist said, oh, you've been on these for a while. Do we need to talk about getting you off them?
Yeah.
And I just thought, A, it's none of your freaking business. Yeah. And B, no. I said, no, I'm on them for pain. But it was the sense of failure.
My doc,
failure that she gave me. It's like, oh, we'll get you off then.
my doctor's always trying to get me off.
I said it.
I said it.
When did you last have? Now I've known you through Petrie, so it's her to blame. So I've known you for a number of years now. And when did you last have a serious bout of depression?
7 years ago, and I tell you what, it is the rocking in the corner. My poor husband.
Ooh.
I promise you, these are the things. I'll talk you through from my night through the next.
Okay, that would be very helpful.
So let's say I've had my day, so I'll explain that as we go. Oh no, I'll start from the beginning. Wake up 5 in the morning. David's fast asleep. So going back a little bit, I'll have gone to sleep saying to David, because I'll have felt a bit better by the evening, going, and you're also so relieved that it's bedtime because you can escape your mind. So, and David's lying by me, and I'll say, I'm so scared of going to sleep now because when I wake up, you're going to be asleep and it's going to start again. And so you'd wish you wouldn't ever wake up. So what I used to do is I'd have a Valium by my bed at 5 o'clock so I could take it, so I could get rid of that anxiety to go back to sleep, because I wouldn't want to keep waking him up because he goes through so much. So anyway, I would wake up, be out in the sitting room, just maybe phoning my mom or someone just to get me through until David woke up. As soon as David wakes up, I will cling to his arm like this and follow him in every room saying, David, I'm going to be all right, aren't I? I mean, I could get emotional thinking about it. It's such a horrible place. I can't tell you how horrible it is. I'd be walking around saying, and this is how often, I'm going to be all right, aren't I? Yes, you're going to be fine, Lou. David, I'm going to be all right, aren't I? And that's his day. That is his day. I swear on my life, I'm not exaggerating, would be his whole day. He'd sit on the sofa, I'd be beside him. If he went in the bar, I'd have to sit on the floor with him. If he would sit on the toilet, I'd be sitting with him. I could cry talking about it. It's so, you're so lost. And he's such a rock to me. And you just cling to that because you're in such dire, desperate place. You can't think of anything else in a non-selfish way because your brain won't let you, but you're just like concentrating on it. Then, like I say, he'll go to work or whatever, and he'll have to be phoning me. I say, send me a text saying I'm going to be all right. All throughout the whole day. It's that bad. His sister suffers it as well. We're actually on the same medication and we speak to each other when we're in it. And her thing is, and this is how ridiculous it is, what she thinks she can't go out when she's in her depression because she'll kill children.
Because she'll what?
Kill children.
Wow. Oh, wow.
But, I mean, if you met this girl, she's not that person. And she would never do it. She won't go out, but she won't go out because that's in her mental state.
That's a completely irrational thought.
Listen, on this mind to how irrational it is, I'll be having an MRI because I think I'll have cancer of something or anything like this that will come back and say, no, here's your thing, it's perfectly fine. I do, but what's that? Me trying to read my own X-ray.
It's an interesting one. So the one thing that I suffered with is panic attacks, and that's another it's on the spectrum of depression, isn't it? It's on that feeling of panic. And I don't think that anybody who's never had a panic attack could ever understand. I wouldn't wish them on my worst
Petrie,
enemy.
what happens? Walk us through, because again, this is you're both being so honest, and bless you for this. I was hoping you would. What happens? Walk us through when you get a panic attack. What happens to you physically?
The only problem with a panic attacker is that talking about it and thinking about it.
Oh, is it going to trigger it?
Well, you fear that it will.
All right. Well, then don't.
I think the first time. No, I'm happy to talk about it. The first time.
I want to see it live.
First time that I ever had a panic attack, I was pregnant and very, very stressed, and I couldn't put my pregnancy down and walk away from it. I was trapped with this pregnancy, and there's a lot of pregnant women that will understand that feeling of that being entirely trapped in your own body.
Now, don't you, Petrie?
And he's 23 and I'm still trapped. Yeah, but anyway, I remember going to visit a friend of mine who's still one of my best friends. I've known her since I was 9 years old.
I thought I was.
It's not all
you're
about
obviously the
you. We
queen.
are listening to Petrie now.
And I just, the feeling is of needing to run somewhere, just to run, just to get away from something. And it's a rush of adrenaline, which we have in our bodies. It's fight or flight. And you get this sudden rush that you feel like you need to run out of the house. You have to run somewhere. And it was absolutely horrendous. And I had it once on a tube years later. And it was exacerbated by being trapped in tanks in Bosnia, this feeling of being trapped. But I remember being on a tube. There was nobody else really on the tube apart from a bloke who was sitting 2 chairs away from me. And I suddenly had this feeling of not being able to breathe and looking at the doors and wondering where I could run and how I could do this. And I wanted to scream and I wanted to tear my own head off. And this bloke came and sat right next to me and just started talking to me. And I was like, and he was just calming me down. And eventually I said, thank you. And he said, my girlfriend suffers from panic attacks and I recognized it in you. And bless him if he didn't walk me off the tube and up to the street level and then go back and get on his tube.
And they've been together ever since.
Yeah, exactly.
But anybody who's had a panic attack, and the one thing that worked for me, because I don't want to just dish out what is horrible, I read a book by a genius woman called Dr. Claire Weeks. Weeks as in weeks and weeks of lockdown. Dr. Claire Weeks.
That's good.
Thank you. And it was absolutely brilliant. And the way that I get out of it now, if I start to feel it, and I still have them, people who have panic attacks, you're right on the edge of them at all times. Just write down how you feel. Start by saying, I found some of my old notes the other day saying, right, I feel like I'm going to die. I feel like my heart's going to explode. I feel like But if you're writing it down, you're concentrating on writing it down, and therefore the symptoms start to subside. So that, for me, it worked. So try.
Let me read a couple of. Hang on, Timmy. Let me read a couple. Francesca Sullivan Hester. I had panic attacks for years. Awful. Turns out mine were hormone related.
Huh?
And then Julia McDermott, who's a good chum from the Soho Whiskey Club and the Soho Cigar Club, it has to be said, I had panic attacks after getting mugged on the way home from work. The attackers, realizing that they couldn't get my bag off me straight away, I had it across my body, decided to try to push my 4-year-old son into the road.
Oh my God.
I was able to get the bag off me and give it to them, but each time I went out, I just seized up.
I'm not surprised.
I bet they never found them.
Of course not. It's absolutely terrifying. And
you were saying about you wanting to go somewhere. That's such a good thing. That's what I felt like when you're in it. If somebody said, "Can you post?"
Run.
If somebody said to me, "Can you post that letter at the corner?" That would have been great. But I tell you what, I'd want that corner to be in Edinburgh. Do you know what I mean? Because you just don't want to get to the destination. But the walking is so good for you because you're not thinking about it. So that would be my advice. Actually, like you're saying, give something good about it. Is walk.
Timmy, I do a lot. I do a lot of walking, especially with the dog, and I find it very therapeutic. Timmy, do you live? I'm not going to say in fear, but do you worry right at the back of your mind that these horrible bouts of depression might come back?
Well, like Petrie was saying, I can feel it.
It's always there, isn't it?
Or it is always there, because I tell you what, it's the worst. It's a really horrible disease, actually. Is it a disease?
It's ghastly.
It's ghastly. Yeah.
It's horrible. So there is always that, and you'll never realize how bad it is until you're in it, because actually each episode you're further along and you forget about it and you just think, what if I'm just going to go mad? What if I absolutely will never get out of this? And it's every time. David will also say, you're saying all the questions again. It just goes like that.
Yeah.
All the same questions.
And I'm glad you used the word disease. And I was talking about this with post-traumatic stress disease, I think it should be called. Because disorder, it gives the impression that something is broken. And when things are broken, they have to be fixed. Whereas depression and panic attacks are potentially things that can't be fixed, but they can be learned to live with. So I don't like disorder because it sounds too chaotic. I think disease is right to describe trauma or to describe panic attacks or depression, because disorder makes me it feels like broken.
And actually, David before hasn't. I'm seeing my name on the screen. We're open and honest, apparently. Thanks, Paul. But David has really now understood it. He will absolutely, and he feels so sorry. If you go back in the day to those people that didn't have the medication and were put away.
Oh yeah, they would have had lobotomies and things like that.
Beautiful lives if they'd had their serotonin.
Now, while I've got Petrie, who is queen of all things media, I'm not doing the gag that's obviously following that. Here's the thing. Here's just not queen. Here's the thing. Denise Welsh has been on our show 3 times with great effect. Huge impact on the audience. We know her. She's a very, very nice woman. What you see is what you get. She's exactly the same, on, off. It's all the same. She is being castigated. I'm not going to get onto her COVID views. That's a side issue. But she is being castigated, especially by, and I'm going to say Piers Morgan, who seems to not just dislike her, but actually loathe her with a passion, which is quite extraordinary, when she talks about mental health. Why is it that some people will say you're just doing it for attention, which is clearly what Piers Morgan thinks about Denise Welsh. And if I've read her book, many people have read her book. It's superb. And Timmy, you should actually read it, because a lot of what you say, it's great.
I think I can answer that, because I think there are some celebrities who virtue signal, who want attention, and who are prepared to get their dirty laundry out at any opportunity and wave it, and I think we're bored of it. It's kind of like, oh yes, well I've had depression too. It's like, okay, that's fine, but unless you're going to add to the conversation, just saying it isn't very helpful. And I think that Piers Morgan, I really like Piers Morgan, by the way. I've met him a few times. I've interviewed him. He's a thoroughly nice guy, but he's very different.
I just want to pick you up on that. He's very different. He's one of those people who, when he's on TV, plays one character. If you actually meet him, he's actually a very nice guy. You wouldn't think so, but he's totally different fellow when you meet him in the flesh.
One of the most startling, moments was when Alistair Campbell came forward as having had mental health issues. And certainly it's helpful when celebrities say it, but it's not helpful if they're just saying it for attention. And there are those that do and are, and we know who they are.
Denise Welsh has been a pioneer.
Oh, I'm not saying it's Denise at all. I know she is. And I think it's important. Yeah. If you're going to talk about mental health, you've got to be brutally honest about it, and hopefully come up with some solutions that you found useful. Because otherwise, there's no point.
Petrie, I said walking. Yeah. So that's not anything.
No.
And one of the interesting,
feeling so guilty. I'm not talking about that. No, it is interesting that we know when people are saying it for effect. We do.
Yeah.
What's interesting about Denise's book, which I thought was some of the main points that she was getting across, and she got across very well. There was no reason for the depression. She'd be sitting there, everything was fine, and bang, out of nowhere. And she said, "Oh my God!" And she'd be in the car heading off to do a shoot or something, or go off to filming, and bang, it would just come out of nowhere. And I think one of the things, and we're running out of time, but one of the things people think is, oh, Timmy's depressed because of XYZ, or Fred Smith's depressed because of XY. It isn't that. It's very different.
Yeah.
And it's a very important point to get across, because if you've had trauma in your life, as we were saying at the front end of the show, going back to the Bosnia thing, etc., with Petrie, that's understandable.
Yeah,
that's a thing that you can identify. And you went, I came across a mass grave, and I can't get it. Of course, but when it comes out of nowhere, it's really that's the shocker.
That's what I would. I would be sat on Bucks Fizz's lap, my favourite pop group, and I'd have a depression. That's how I do coin that. I say, and that's
Well, it
how
depends if you're sitting on Cheryl's lap or Jay Aston's lap. And on that brilliant note, Petrie
We're done.
Hosken, I cannot thank you enough. It's been an absolute pleasure.
On your
Timmy, well, you had nothing else to do, so thank you for rocking by. No, Timmy, it's been really interesting. Thank you for being so open. I want you to come back again. Oh, yeah, we're going to do all that. Lovely. Thank you. I'm What's Left of Russ Kane. This is Men's Radio Station. Bless you for listening all over the world. Whatever you're doing today, have fun. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.